Greetings, dear friends. This is Kami broadcasting from downtown Kingston. We're going to turn our attention to another chapter of our journey in the chemical and biological warfare, and that is protection. This was the shape and form of individual protection few weeks after April 1915 of the Battle of Ypres. We have come a long, long way since then. So, let me take some time to highlight various ways and means of protection. The best protection is prevention. Prevention of exposure. In other words, no exposure is the best prevention. And first on that list is intelligence. And I'm sure some of you will be involved in that business in the future. For intelligence, we have basically two matters. To identify intent, meaning we know the bad guys, who they are, and their intention. And another one is their capability. In other words, what chemical warfare agents they have in their possession, and the methods of dissemination available to them. So these things are a must. The next one after that is detection, meaning detection as early as possible at the lowest concentration possible. Those two factors are absolutely a must in this protection business. I guess then we can look at individual protection in the form of clothing and respirator mask, which is called IPE. And then after that, equally I guess important, is the collective protection. In other words, materials and designs of command and control structures and vehicles that shelters individuals in them. So let's look at the individual protection. We are looking at barriers and impermeable materials and systems. I will look at impermeability in a few minutes, but those materials and systems are of such design and capability that can reduce the penetration of chemicals next to zero or zero. And parallel to that, they facilitate and accelerate decontamination of chemical agents on them. We can look at air filtration systems. So we're looking at basically respiratory mask that are capable, very capable I should say, of solid particle matter filtration. Spores come to mind in this. Aerosols, yes, chemical warfare aerosols, and yes, aerosols that contain spores like anthrax. And last but not least is the chemical warfare agents in the form of vapors. Last is what we call prophylaxis, in other words, pre-treatment and or antidote. We saw that nerve agents, we had available to us pre-treatment I should say, and antidote. Whereas in mustard gas, we had none of the above. So let's look at this idea of impermeability. Well, permeability is the diffusion of agents through a membrane. The speed of that diffusion is referred to as rate of diffusion. If you have very slow diffusion or you have no diffusion, that makes you impermeable when you have no diffusion. If you look at this diagram, you will see that my membrane material is very selective. In other words, if you see the bad guys as the blue molecules and the good guys as the green and purple molecules, you will see that my membrane material allows the good guys, the green and purple molecules, to go through, but to the largest extent possible, it reduces the permeability or diffusion of the blue molecules that we call them the bad guys. Now, what is impermeable? Impermeable, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, is no diffusion. So, it's very simple. You have a metal, you have a glass, or some plastics and coatings. Teflon comes to mind. They are not crossed by an agent. In other words, zero diffusion, impermeable. The agent will only be at the surface, and that's it. No permeability, no diffusion, therefore impermeable. Because of that, presence only at the surface, it is easily decontaminated. The rate of the penetration is limited, hopefully to zero, with the design and smart materials. I am proud to offer you a Canadian know-how, one of the best. You're looking at a smart material membrane with a chemical warfare agent at the surface. The membrane material repels the chemical warfare agents, so you can see that is not spread on the surface and it beads up. That means no diffusion, no permeability, and easily shaken off. Now, we talked about that membrane, which probably it will be incorporated in the protective clothing, and it will protect the CAF members against the effects of chemical warfare when they come in contact with. But it should do this as long as possible. In other words, you cannot have a perfect material that only lasts a matter of an hour. That is not good. It has to be comfortable, folks. We cannot imprison people in a situation that they cannot exist for a long period of time. Yes, it has to respond to various weather conditions. It has to be able to withstand hot, cold, humid, and so on and so forth. It has to allow you to be mobile. If you're in a situation that you are performing a critical duty, your mobility is critical while you're dressed in that protective clothing. Now, when we talk about protective clothing, I'm going to use the Horizon One clothing for the Canadian Armed Forces as an example. I am going to point to that membrane that is used in Horizon 1. And you can see it in here showing 3 levels. Blue, outside, the middle layer, and the red inside. Well, life is good. The outer layer performs its duty perfectly. It completely repels or bounces off oil and water. Check mark. Chemical warfare agents in the form of liquid, check mark. They bounce off. They do not stay on the surface. Therefore, they pose very little or no hazard. Now, chemical warfare agents in the form of vapor have some permeability, but the rate of that is limited by the middle layer by adsorption. And I will talk about that very soon in the next video. At the same time, the sweat and heat generated by your body is projected out, giving you the comfort to perform your tasks. Thank you for your attention. I will be back in a theater near you soon.